So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be here and to talk about future ICT's ideas about building a planetary nervous system and what we could do with it, actually. I'd like to go back a little bit more, a few thousand years, because since times at school we've been fascinated by the great civilizations, like the Egyptians, who came up with inventions that we're still using, like paper and writing, mirrors, glasses, and of course what is important for every Belgian, beer. China came up with porcelain and gunpowder, with compasses and printing, and with silk. We're still using all this. But also, Europe was actually quite contributing something to the civilizations of the past. And today, which is, for example, philosophy and democracy. Or take the Romans, who came up with cement or paved roads or bridge construction. And maybe even more important than that is Roman law, because that's the basis of the law we have today. So the question is, what would be the next big civilization? Now, would we be able to come up with inventions that would be used in 2,000 or 5,000 years from now? How well are we doing on the way to a great civilization? And what we recognize is that we're struggling with quite a number of problems, such as the world financial, economic, and debt crisis, with social and political instabilities, with global environmental change, global warming, or organized crime. Cybercrime is now exploding exponentially, and also with quick spreading of emerging diseases, to mention just a few of those problems that we're facing. And so we really need to get better in understanding these kind of problems. What are the driving factors and what can we do about them? Now, in fact, times are changing. People are very much kind of dedicated to information and information systems. So you can see it quite often that friends go out together, but each of them is actually busy with writing emails or text messages or WhatsApp or whatever. So we are information species. Information, given that we have enough to eat, is one of the most important resources for us. And this is going to be the driver of the 21st century. It will be an age of information. And in fact, this is driven by Moore's law, which for more than 100 years now shows an exponential growth, or even super exponential growth, in the processing capacity of computer chips. And as a result of this, by the year of 2025 or 30, you may expect that computers will exceed the capacity of the human brain, and perhaps one day even the capacity of all human brains. Well, while the second thing is maybe debatable, the first thing is most likely to happen within our lifetimes. And so this will change our economy dramatically, because computers and robots will be able to do many of the jobs that we're doing today. And the question is, what will be our job? What will be the position of humans in this new world? Processing capacity is one thing, but data storage is another thing. This is growing even faster than processing capacity. Every year is the storage capacity doubling, and things will kind of even explode more in terms of information production as the Internet of Things becomes part of our lives. It's now eventually coming, but in a few years from now we'll have billions, if not trillions, of sensors distributed all over our environment and measuring all sorts of things that we cannot even imagine today. The question is, what would we do with all the data? What would we do with all the power resulting from that, and hopefully the right things? It could be very well like somebody who has kind of superpowers but doesn't know how to use them. And then it could be extremely destructive. Of course, we want to make the right things. Some people think the more information, the better. On the other hand, of course, we have limited processing capacity. Not only our brains have limited processing capacity, but also the amount of information we'll have in the future will exceed more and more the processing capacity of all processors that we have in the world. But anyway, so some people dream of the possibility to know everything about the state of the world, what is going on, and maybe the NSA is the invention that comes closest to this. The amount of information recorded today about human activities is comparable to the amount of data that's produced by CERN. So it can actually be processed, and people like Stephen Wolfram have invented many great things. In particular, Wolfram Alpha, the search engine, says that people are actually more predictable than elementary particles. Yeah? So we have regular ways of organizing our days. Monday to Friday we go to work at certain times, and we have other kinds of regular activities. Maybe we go to the gym or visit our grandparents at the weekend or whatsoever. All of that is quite predictable and becomes even more predictable as you know about friends of people and about your buying behavior and all sorts of things. So there will be an abundance of data of human activities, and the question is, what could we do with that kind of data? Hopefully good things and not bad things. Now the difficulty here is, of course, even if everybody wanted to do good things with information, we don't always know beforehand what will be turning out good and what will turn out to be bad. But certainly what we'll be able to do is to craft new instruments to explore the world. In the very same way as we have created telescopes and microscopes in the past, or X-ray to see things that we could otherwise not see, will we be able to create instruments that allow us to see the underlying fabric of our society, what keeps our society together, what makes our economy work well. So these are the things that become possible. And for that very reason, Future ICT was actually proposing a number of different information platforms. And one of them is the Planetary nervous system that would collect information in real time, if possible, and use it basically to get a picture of the world, not only the physical and biological world, but also technology, the social world, the economic world, and so on. And use that to get aware of the situation we're in and inform us to take better decisions. But we can take it a step further with the Living Earth simulator, which would be fed by this kind of data, but it would be able actually to look at what-if scenarios and in this way explore the possible implications of our decisions and actions, be it risks or side effects or feedback effects or opportunities. So all of that will be very relevant for us to avoid mistakes and take better decisions. And of course these tools would potentially be quite powerful, and we'd like them to be useful for as many people as possible. So it should not just be a tool for politicians or for business managers, but for everybody. So it will be important actually to open up the power of information for everybody, really to boost information society, to make it a flourishing age, a new grand civilization. I'll now go into more details. I believe actually that we will soon have a planetary nervous system, and The reason is that you can buy this book, The Human Face of Big Data, a beautiful big book, and you would think it costs 150 euros, but it turns out to cost just 37 euros, and it was sent to 10,000 key people, key decision makers, and that means somebody is trying to influence people to make it happen. And see what headline they have in the forward, it's a planetary nervous system. So future ICT's idea was finding fertile ground, I would say. And I believe science can make a great contribution to this. So how would it happen, basically? Well, you would have to collect information from all over the world and somehow put it together to get a picture of the world. Right? And this is the overall idea. And compared to what we have today, where everybody can use Google, and you're kind of typing in your question, Google will then look into their database, and that is old data, more or less old data. And it will look into the data in their way. And we have no idea what is the quality of the return, of the answer that we get, how much are we manipulated, how old is the data, and all these kind of things. So the idea is that in the future, your request would trigger off a real-time measurement request. So assume you have sensor networks all over the world, just my smartphone, for example, has about 10 sensors in it. We could use those sensors actually for measurements, of course, assuming informed consent and user control, and I don't want to steal it from users or so. But in principle, we can build such a planetary nervous system even with the kind of sensors that almost everybody has today. And so we could use it to measure how noisy is a particular street in Hong Kong at a certain time, or what is the temperature in New York City now, or how long have people to wait in a traffic jam in London in this particular street at the moment, or how happy are people in Brussels just now. And these kind of questions could be measured in real time. You would configure the sensors in a similar way as you do it at CERN. So, if you want to measure this, you have to use the sensor and the computing infrastructure in a different way than if you're looking for that. And in the very same way, we have to learn how those sensors can be used in multiple ways to deliver the information that you want to have. And also throw away sensitive information in the information gathering process. So we don't want to spy on people, right? And for most of the questions that we're interested in, we don't need to know about the individual person, but we would average over many people in a certain place. So all the sensitive individual information could be thrown away already while gathering that answer that I was asking for. So one of the things that we could do is to measure the world state, in particular the social footprint and social capital like trust. As I said before, you could do that in a privacy-respecting way. But altogether, it's a CERN-like vision to create a measurement instrument for techno-social and economic environmental systems. And that sounds exciting, so let's do it. And it would probably be cheaper than building CERN. So we could also do it in a participatory way. It's not the government of Belgium and Germany and Italy that has to buy that stuff. What is needed basically is a protocol to exchange the data, to make those sensors talk to each other and send that information to me or to you or to whoever is asking for an answer. And then people could just buy these kinds of sensors, and we could kind of finance that in a distributed way. It could be done within just a few years. You just have to decide to do that. And how would it work? Well, to give you an idea, I am bringing a video of Mark Polyphase and his collaborators, and they have basically collected pictures from the internet, millions of pictures actually, and what they're then doing after they're collecting it, they're trying to identify the locations where the people have been standing when they took the pictures, and also where the cameras have been pointing, and then match those pictures to get a much bigger picture of what is going on. It takes about a day at the time when that video was created, and what you finally get is a full 3D reconstruction of the place without having to go there. So you can do that from your desk at home or in your office, and basically get the world into your living room, yeah, at your fingertips. So in the very same way could be reconstruct basically what is going on in the world at any point in time. Yes, please.
What are the basis images for this?
These are the pictures that tourists are taking. These are just on the web. Now they're anyway out there, and you use them, put them together to create a better picture, a 3D picture. And we could do that, you know, even time dependent if you wanted. So that certainly allows us to think about the possibility to create something even like a global brain. And I like the idea actually of the Global Brain Institute, that by putting people's intelligence together and all the data that is out there in the world, you can create something more intelligent, right? Collective intelligence, much more intelligent than every single person in the world. And that's actually the kind of intelligence that we need to get to grip with the problems that we're facing in the 21st century, because by connecting everything, making everything interdependent and global, the world became so complex that we cannot understand it anymore with our brain. It's a new world, we need to learn how it works, but by the time we've learned how it works, it's already different again. So we're always behind the way the world works. And our brain cannot just cope with that anymore. Our intuition is not good enough in many cases, and we don't have the experience from the past because it's a new world. So we need to have more intelligent, I don't know, devices, or let's just say we need collective intelligence to help us. But there is maybe one little thing that I'd like to criticize about the name of your institute, which is I think it should be called a Global Brains Institute, I mean with an S in the end. And the reason for this is that I believe that it would be dangerous if we would end up with a super brain that believes it understands everything and believes it's capable of taking the best possible decision for everybody in the world, and would also be authorized to do that because it's more intelligent than anybody in the world, more intelligent than Angela Merkel and than Barack Obama and maybe even the NSA today. And so the question is, would that work? There are some people now, I believe, in particular in intelligent circles, who are dreaming this dream, you know, if we would have all the data in the world, know everything, you know, knowledge is power, that means we would just be almighty. That's an idea. So that's why some of these intelligence services are just collecting as many data as they can get. I don't think this is going to work well. I think it would end in disaster. And the reason is that the world is so complex that one particular view, and be it a view of a 1,000 times more intelligent being, would not suffice to understand the full complexity of the world. Now, we are networking the world, that makes it more complex, and this complexity is exploding even faster than the complexity, than the power of computers. Why that? Because the complexity is growing in a factorial way, while the computational power is only growing in an exponential way. So that means that as the complexity of the world increases, optimization in real time will be less and less possible. Top-down decision making will be less and less feasible. And it will be more and more important actually to come up with flexible responses to the local situation that people or companies or governments are in. And that means a multi-perspective approach is extremely important. Diversity is extremely important. There is a reason why we are so diverse and why we are calling ourselves individuals. I mean, everybody is different. As compared to ants or bees, for example, where they have more or less the same genetic code, and so they have the same kind of interests. We often have different interests, conflicts of interest. And the question is, why is that so? Now, is it something which is good or bad? And people often feel troubled by diversity. We have difficulties handling diversity. But there must be a reason why we have so much diversity. And it's because diversity is the driver of innovation. The same applies actually in biology, on time scales of biological evolution. That kind of the evolution of ideas is much quicker. And also here, diversity is the driver of the cultural evolution speed. So if you would narrow down diversity, reduce it, it would mean that we would slow down cultural evolution. And it's probably not a thing that we can afford or that we want to do. So we need to learn how to handle diversity. In fact, if you're trying to reduce diversity, for example, by influencing people's decisions. We'll come back to recommender systems later on. So today, every company wants to learn about you and you and you, what you think, what you want, what you feel, what you're interested in, what you want to buy. And they want to know it because they want to use this information not just to know about you, but to sell their products. I mean, to manipulate your decision making. However, we know that the wisdom of crowds is based on independent decision making. And if you influence people in their decision making, that can undermine the wisdom of crowds, and that could actually destroy a system like democracy, which is built on the idea of the wisdom of crowds. So if you start manipulating people's decisions, that could just demolish democracy over time. And maybe we are actually in these kind of problems already. If you look at the problems that the US is in at the moment. So diversity is very important. That's why I'm saying we need to protect socio-diversity in the same way as biodiversity.
Can you explain that scheme, because it's not clear to me?
This one here?
Yeah.
So the point is, as social influence increases, and we know that from the Ash experiment, where somebody was asked, how long is this line as compared to a shorter, same size line and a longer line. And there were 5 people, say, who were asked before that experimental person, and they claimed something else than what was the true length of the line. And in many cases, people were finally saying the wrong thing. But even without so much group pressure, in our experiments, it turned out that the performance of estimating the correct answer to a factual question was going down when people interacted repeatedly. They just were informed about the choices of the others that was already ruining their performance. So independence of decision making is extremely important, and that's why I think, okay, we don't want to have one global brain, but we want to have an information infrastructure that allows us to come up with collective intelligence, but not just with one, but with different collective intelligence. That we basically have different perspectives on the same thing. So in the same way as we cannot see the moon from both sides at the same time, we need different perspectives to have the full picture.
Let me just interrupt you. We'll speak about later about it in the debate, but this multiplicity of perspectives is an essential part of the global brain. A global brain is distributed. Lots of things are going on in parallel, and there is not a centralized decision maker.
This is a small video that basically shows that given a number of common perspectives, I mean sensors distributed in the environment, people can actually come up with all sorts of perspectives, who can look at the same scene from a number of different points of views. And I think this is very important, that we really support multiple perspectives. And with this, we can build new compasses for decision makers. Apart from measuring GDP per capita, we can measure many other things that matter as well, such as social capital, like reputation and trust, solidarity, compliance, or happiness. And that becomes even more important as we cannot raise GDP per capita so much anymore for a number of reasons. First of all, now there's a lack of money, and second of all, it's maybe not good for our environment. So it pays off to pay attention to these other dimensions that are also important for people. But with all these data that we collect, we can build a number of useful tools, such as an observatory for financial instabilities. And actually, my colleague Didier Sonnet is building such a thing. We can measure and predict epidemic spreading. So I was involved in this study over here, which actually makes the complex spatial-temporal spreading patterns understandable and reconstructible and predictable. So that can be very useful to put scarce medical resources in the right places at the right time in order to be more effective in fighting diseases, and in this way save lives of people. We can also measure international tension. For this we have mined millions of Google News articles and did something like a sentiment analysis, and it turns out that you can do it in a way that allows you to predict the probability of war within a certain future time span. So that is data that's spanning over more than 100 years, I believe. And we can also understand the spreading of international tension from one place to the environment. And one interesting question to look at, for example, is whether the Arab Spring, which of course is a result of the instability in this area over here, might have been also an indirect consequence of the war on Iraq, and other things that happen in this area. That's certainly not the only factor. I mean, food prices were important, and even individual events such as somebody burning himself, and many other things. But one shouldn't neglect these kind of long-term effects, actually.
Did you take into account the fact that if you go back in history, there will be less and less news available, so lots of violent conflicts will simply not appear in your database that were there, but that now will be magnified?
Well, they will not be neglected, because if they're large enough, then a war between countries, we're talking about a single aggressive war among countries, and within the last 100 years, all those events have been recorded. I know what you mean, and actually I don't have the answer at the moment. I would have to ask my postdoc how it's been looking at the data. And we can also build exploratories for transport and logistics and many more things. The only precondition for this is that we have access to the data. So in order for all these wonderful things to happen, maybe we should just open up data for everybody. So we could use it for something useful. We could come up with our own business, our consultancy. Everybody could do that. In the very same way as Wikipedia has fueled the knowledge economy, I think that would fuel it even more. And what do we need more at the moment than new jobs in Europe? And a recipe against youth unemployment. So opening up data would really help to address this issue. So linear simulator will be using these kind of data. And how would it work? Well, in principle, you would integrate existing models of traffic and production, economic system, crowd behavior, cooperations, social norms, conflict, crime, war, and whatever. Would integrate them eventually. It takes time, complicated, but I think it's doable. You would eventually scale them up to global scale, and you would increase the detail and the accuracy, as we've done it actually with weather forecasts, and we know it will never be perfect, yes, for principal reasons. Weather forecast works only over a short time and only with some probability, but we also know that every single euro that we're investing into this pays off multiple times. So it's useful. And in the very same way would this be useful if we use it carefully and considering that the implications of these models may apply only with a certain probability and over a short time. But it would be useful to have this, and here is an example how it would work. The simulation of global spreading.
Population densities and intense mobility increasingly threaten to push epidemics to pandemic proportions. The costs of such pandemics can be immense. Countless fatalities, untold physical and emotional pain, soaring healthcare costs, and supply chain disruptions. Now, with GLEAN, we can analyze how infections may spread globally and assess the best ways to minimize their impact. By combining epidemic models with real-world data. GLEAN produces simulations of the global spread of infectious diseases by integrating 3 layers. The first layer looks at people and their geographic distribution with respect to major transportation hubs. The second layer adds data on the mobility of the people, how they commute and travel around the globe. The third and final layer adds the epidemic model, which can define complex disease scenarios and response strategies such as vaccination campaigns or emergency travel restrictions. Combining these 3 layers GLEAM simulates epidemic spread at a worldwide scale. The resulting forecasts and scenario analyses help inform on how best to counter pandemic threats. Visit gleanbiz.org to learn more about GLEAM.
So this is one of the first examples of a public tool that is capable of integrating data on a global scale in a way that has predictive use. And that very same principle could now be extended to many other things. I see you looking at the watch, so you tell me how much more you want to see.
No, we want to see more.
Well, the same thing could be further extended by making it interactive. We could come up actually with multiplayer online games, for example, in order to test the behavior of real people. As long as we're working with models, there's always a chance that the model is not good enough. So why not measure what people do by creating virtual worlds and letting them act in these virtual worlds? So we could create a copy of our world, but we could also create parallel worlds with different financial architectures, different decision principles, and different intellectual property rights, and see how that changes the world over time through interactions of people. So why restrict to the world we have? We could actually create hundreds and thousands of virtual worlds according to the laws that come to mind. So again, the multiple perspectives comes through here. So everybody could basically choose a virtual world, or maybe even 10 or 20 or 100 virtual worlds that he'd like to interact with and participate in. That all will be possible. And now, why is participation important? It's not just important actually for crowd everything, like basically crowdsourcing, crowd intelligence, and so on. But as the complexity of the world increases, I told you before that a centralized control will less and less satisfactorily work. And that's why we'll have to learn how to do distributed control. And I don't like to call it control, in fact, but we need to learn how to manage the world in a more distributed way. And when we talk about society,
distributed governance, governance is the fashionable.
That means participatory approaches, like bottom-up democracy, for example, or also bottom-up management of companies of the future. Which doesn't mean that we would have to change the companies that we have today, but we would have additional companies that are run in different ways. And I will argue why we'll have these companies and how it would work. But certainly Wikipedia, of course, is a great example of this participatory principle. It's probably the best encyclopedia in the world. By now, there are a huge number of people from all over the world participating in this. Here's another example, OpenStreetMap. Started a few years ago, and by now it's providing the most up-to-date map of the world. You see here how eventually the map of London was created. So you see a large speed up now, and within a short time actually the picture of London becomes more and more detailed. By now, there are more than 1 million people in the world who are contributing to OpenStreetMap. And here's another application where maybe I skipped that to gain a little bit of time, where people are providing information about their locations at mass events, but also they would get something back. So That's actually a different video than I wanted to play. But the point is, of course, people will be contributing and they will be benefiting from the system. I think this is very important because it creates incentives for people to contribute data and knowledge. And people expect actually that our production will fundamentally change. In what way? Well, people say the 21st century was the century of the democratization of consumption. And now we are entering a century of the democratization of production. We will have the opportunities not just to consume, but also to contribute to the production of products. So we will not just select the color of the product or a number of features from a catalog, but we could design those features ourselves. We call this prosumers. And in fact, now people are buying solar panels and producing electricity for themselves and others. They're capable of producing at home with 3D printers. And so there are many new opportunities now that allow a decentralized production of anything almost. And the whole thing will be fueled by social media, because if you have a great idea, you can set up a project and say, who is joining in to come up with a new kind of fashion, or a new coffee cup, or a new kind of music, or a movie, or whatever comes to your mind. Just find the people, organize yourself. Social media allow you to do that. You don't need to have a large infrastructure to do this. Yeah? The tools allow you to set it up in a simple way, and kind of the next generation social media will be targeted actually towards supporting your productivity. In fact, here is a canvas that Bernard Huberman was sharing with me, which is reflecting a discussion at Hewlett Packard sometime back. And they were discussing about rethinking civilization for the social age. And so you see discussions about new ways of organizing institutions, talking about social revolution based on self-organization, means using self-organization as a means of organizing systems. And there are many things that we cannot even go into at the moment. I think there is no doubt that social media have the potential to transform the way of social interactions and of economic production. And that brings us to a new kind of economy, which I call economy 2.0. But it's in fact a third way of organizing our socio-economic system. So the first one is a centrally planned economy, where the organization and the regulation happens in a top-down way. We know this didn't work very well. And that's why we have now a market economy where organization happens bottom up. That means companies can decide many things by themselves. But certain things don't work out, and that requires regulation. Politics steps in and decides in a top-down way to a certain extent at least. Well, the underlying concept of this bottom-up self-organization is the Homo economicus. And I'd like to advertise a third way of going about things, which would not just organize things in a bottom-up way, but also learn how to regulate our system in a bottom-up way. It means a self-regulating system. However, that requires what I call a homo socialis, or in other words, other regarding decision-making, considering the impact of decisions on the environment and on others. Now, that's not driven by ideology. In fact, we've done simulations where the Homo socialis was one outcome besides the Homo economicus. And it turns out that in these simulations, the Homo socialis finally does a much better job. That means he earns more money. And that is interesting. And why is that? Because the Homo socialis, with the other regarding behavior, can overcome tragedies of the commons that the selfish Homo economicus is running into. The idea is quite old, actually, 300 years old. The fable of bees basically suggests that why can't we run our society like a beehive? That is happening on very simple interactions, but there is a wonderful organization that is resulting from these simple interactions. The queen of the beehive is actually not telling other bees what to do. It happens by self-organization. And Adam Smith, of course, is well known for this concept of the invisible hand, assuming that somehow if everybody does the right thing for him, there would be a magic kind of coordination that finally leads to a good systemic outcome as well. And in fact, in certain kinds of situations, that's working well. Like over here, where you can see that pedestrians are organizing themselves into lanes of uniform walking direction, and that makes actually the motion quite fluid. There is little friction in the system. I can really say it's like magic. It doesn't require any laws telling people what to do. No policeman telling people what to do. It happens just by self-organization. People are not even aware of it. So it's really local interactions that produces this. However, we also know it sometimes goes wrong. Yeah? If the density is too high, if you push the system too far, then the invisible hand fails and the coordination breaks down. We've seen it also in the financial meltdown in 2008. We see it also in those famous tragedies of the commons like environmental exploitation or overfishing or environmental pollution or global warming and many other tragedies of the commons where bottom-up self-organization just doesn't produce the state that would be good for everybody. Because cooperation is unstable, although it would be desirable. And for that reason, politics steps in and says, okay, we have to set a framework for this self-organization. We need a strong state that basically setting the rules, and every year we have hundreds of new laws, and eventually there are tens of thousands of laws that nobody actually knows. Of course, these laws have to be implemented and enforced, otherwise it's just on paper. And while that works reasonably well in some countries, we can see that's extremely expensive. And most industrialized states actually have 100% GDP of debt, or even 200%. So the question arises, will we be able to go on like this and pay this? We've just seen the discussion in the United States. They were almost bankrupt. Yesterday, the European Union wanted to decide about their budget. It hasn't happened. So, can we go on like this forever? Or do we need to have a new approach? And that's why I come back to the Homo socialis with the other regarding behavior. In fact, even Adam Smith was aware of this. He said, however selfish man may be supposed, there are evidently some principles in his nature which interest him in the fortune of others and render the happiness necessary to him, though he derives nothing from it. So people, many people at least, it turns out the majority of people have other regarding preferences. There are some people who are selfish, they do exist, but it's not the majority of people. But economics has always assumed that 100% of people would be a Homo economicus, and the economic institutions have been designed for the Homo economicus. And I believe that's the reason why the Homo socialis cannot flourish. Anonymous homogeneous exchange is actually undermining cooperation. That's something that we know scientifically. And so the question is, can we come up with institutional designs that would do a better job, that would kind of support other regarding behavior? In fact, here we have a very simple design that's extremely effective, as you can see. Now there is a simple design principle, which is have unidirectional flows in this direction, in that direction. And there is a buffer between those two directions where people can adjust their speed and basically arrive at the intersection just when there is a gap in the flow. So that works really beautifully. And so the question is, can we build such a thing for our traffic system, or maybe even for our economy and society? And we have therefore looked into different ways of managing traffic flows. Again, we have the three kinds of systems: the top-down control, that's kind of the system that we still use today. The central traffic control, also really collecting data from all over the city and then trying to implement the best possible decision for everybody. So we sometimes call it the benevolent dictator, so there's somebody who decides, but trying to do it with an eye on the interest of the people. Let's see how well that works. Then there is another possibility based on the idea of the Homo economicus, and here there is a strict local optimization. That means each intersection is trying to minimize the waiting times of the cars that are approaching. And then third, we have traffic light control that also decentralized and local based on the principle of the Homo socialis. That would also try to minimize the waiting times, but it would have an eye on the queue lengths and avoid that those are reaching the other intersections. So it's other regarding. This intersection we don't have to care about that one, but here it does. So there's a local coordination, and let's see what are the implications of these different kinds of organization or governance or management, however you want to call it. Here we're looking at the queue lengths over the utilization of the intersection. And you can see that top-down regulation is doing a reasonable job. You could say the queue length is increasing with capacity utilization, but that is what you expect. Now, what does the Homo economicus do? The selfish optimization, assuming self-compensation in the system. And it turns out that actually we have much shorter queue lengths. That means Adam Smith's invisible hand works well. Coordination happens. But then, at a certain utilization much below the maximum capacity utilization of the intersection, suddenly the queue length is exploding. And the principle doesn't work anymore. That means Adam Smith's invisible hand fails here. Now, finally, the other regarding optimization, the self-regulation based on the principle of Homo socialis, is actually performing best all over the whole range of the capacity utilization, and it manages to make the principle of the invisible hand work. That means this is the superior way of managing complex, quickly variable, and hardly predictable systems. In fact, you can see over here that there's a beautiful self-compensation of green waves in the system. That has been inspired, by the way, by oscillatory flows and bottlenecks that we find in computer simulations and observations of pedestrian flows. So it's a little bit as if there would be a traffic light but there's not. It's a pressure principle that self-organizes those oscillations, and we transfer the self-organization principle to intersections to produce these green waves, basically. So we can harness complexity by decentralization. And the question is, how can we find a self-organization principle that would allow our socio-economic system to self-regulate? Is that possible at all? 300 years after this idea was promoted by Adam Smith and others, is it possible? And I believe, yes, it's worth trying, actually. We now have the chance to come up with reputation systems. And reputation systems are spreading like wildfire now on the web. And so they must be very useful. In fact, scientific studies show that reputation systems are good not only for buyers who get a better service and can be more confident about this service, but it's also better for sellers because they can sell their product at a higher price, or they can sell better quality because people would be aware of it and not just of the price. However, today's recommender systems are not good enough because they're not paying enough attention to the importance of social diversity. They're trying to manipulate people's decisions, but it creates something like a filter bubble, as Ellie Pariser has pointed out. And so it's no wonder that Democrats and Republicans can't find a compromise anymore, because whenever they look for some information on the web, Democrats get different kind of information as Republicans. They can't understand each other anymore. They're living in their filter bubbles. So if you want to overcome this, basically you have to come up with pluralistic filters. And for this, you would have to open up the reputation data, the ratings that people make, the comments that they make, to allow everybody to mine these kind of data, but determine their own reputation filters. It's not good enough for a company to decide for you what you should be interested in. It's important that you will be able to specify the filter. So assume you're looking for scientific literature that is relevant for you. Yeah? You could come up with a number of different filters, like one filter telling you what is the newest publications in a certain field. What are the most controversially discussed papers? There could be a surprise me filter. There could be a filter telling me what are those scientists that I have most respect for, what are they reading? And if my biggest competitor is willing to share his filter with me, I would also be able to see what is he reading. So everybody of us would create a number of filters, share them with friends and colleagues and so on. They would modify them, and that would create an ecosystem of filters. Now we would have maybe 100 filters. After some time, 90 of them are not used anymore. The others are being used and modified, and then create something like an evolutionary system. So filters become better and better, and that is kind of the benefit of the openness, that we're really creating something like an information ecosystem, and a single company can't do that. So I believe we are really entering a new age, and the era of information society. And that's going to change everything. We'll have to learn to change our thinking. We have to learn how to design systems that would work in a more bottom-up way, in a more participatory way. And maybe that's going to solve a number of problems that we had tried hard to find solutions for, but actually haven't succeeded much, such as global warming. Yeah? Since many years, our governments of the world trying to find a compromise. But they failed to come up with a regulation that would then be imposed on everybody. And so we're waiting, basically, for this to happen. And in the meantime, we find out that rather than 2 degrees centigrade, we'll probably have 4 degrees centigrade of warming, and it will be disastrous for many areas in the world. So couldn't we approach that in a different way? In fact, it turns out that most people live in cities, and most CO2 is produced in cities. So why not turn cities into agents of change and basically say, hey, all those cities who think we should do something about environmental friendliness, let's collaborate. Zurich wants to have a 2,000 watt society. San Francisco, Los Angeles might join into this thinking. There are many cities all over the world who have an environmental friendly attitude. If New York joins in Singapore and a number of other countries, cities, that they would eventually create a drive forward, not based on regulation and forcing countries and forcing people to do something. Don't take the plane to go into holidays, don't take a car, and all these kinds of things. People don't want to hear this. So why don't we turn this into something positive, something we want to do, that we deliberately decide, and maybe even do a sportive approach about it, Like we have Olympic Games every few years. Why don't we have something like Olympic challenges to go about the 21st century problems and say, hey, now that cities of the world compete for the best solutions in environmental friendly production, in energy saving, in reducing CO2, and in improving the mobility system, whatever comes to your mind. Let us come up with our global challenges Olympics and address our challenges in a bottom-up and participatory way. So I'm concluding by saying data is the new oil, but models are the new gold, and participation creates social capital. If you want to read more, and I recommend you this Nature paper and this discussion paper about Economics 2.0.
Most of us have already read it.
That's it. Thank you very much for your interest.